this is my submission for Module 4. The 1905 Santa Fe Harvey Company leaflet for Hopi House uses aesthetic conventions of primitivism and the myth of the vanishing Indian to position indigenous peoples as figures outside of modern society. These ideas associated with Romanticism are discussed in Lecture 18 and beyond and have shaped public perceptions of the era by casting Native Americans as remnants of a simplistic era soon to perish. Primitivism appears in the leaflet's evident admiration for handmade indigenous goods, as seen in the claim, quote, "The white man never has been able to devise machinery that could produce Navajo blankets," end quote. This romanticizes native labor as more authentic than mass production, conforming to the primitivistic fantasies of the wealthy, who were nostalgic for a pre-industrial time, mentioned in Lecture 26. Amid growing critiques of industrialization, many travelers to the Grand Canyon began to romanticize a social order untouched by class conflict and immigration anxieties prevalent in the East. By projecting their primitivist ideas onto Native Americans, they imagined them as people of a fading era who embodied patience, craftsmanship, and harmony. Within this framework, indigenous artisans at Hopi House were not viewed as modern workers, but as representatives of a simpler past, staging cultural performances for tourists rather than being admired for their culture and customs in and of themselves. The leaflet also relies on the myth of the vanishing Indian, a key romantic theme tied to nostalgia and loss. It describes the Hopi as, quote, "the most primitive Indians, clinging tenaciously to their crude way of living," end quote. This description frames indigenous people as survivors of a vanishing race and culture, existing solely to be observed as they inevitably succumb to white civilization. This idea echoes the myth as described by Berkhover in Lecture 18, where he notes that native peoples were expected to, quote, "help the white settler and then die forecasting the wonders and virtues of the civilization that was to supersede the simplicity and naturalness of aboriginal life," end quote. In this context, Hopi House, as discussed in Lecture 28, functioned as a living history display, where tourists could feel close to indigenous artisans without recognizing their real lives. This false intimacy turned Native identity into a form of entertainment, where the Hopi House itself forced Native Americans away from the modern era. Together, these aesthetic conventions conveyed in the Hopi House leaflet serve to position indigenous peoples as both valuable and obsolete. They are admired for their cultural products, yet seen as relics rather than active participants in modern life. This in turn relegates indigenous people to a lower class, as they are seen as figures detached from modernity and progress who have already become history, valued for their cultural nostalgia rather than their ongoing contributions.